and crossing that granite plaza on her first day of work, a fresh steno pad in her bag and her heart going a little fast, is a young woman named Joan. She is 22 years old and she is about to become a secretary in an office high up in a tower like this one. She thinks, this morning, that she is the smallest part of the machine, the girl who will type what she is told and fetch what she is asked. By the time she understands the truth, that the executive she works for would be lost without her, that she will quietly run his entire working life, it will be years from now. She keeps a cloth cover on her typewriter at the end of each day, and one day, decades from now, there will be a different kind of name on a different kind of door because of work that began on this plaza. Because the secretary of 1958 was not what the movies have told you she was. She ran the office, and almost no one said so out loud. These are 15 things a 1950s secretary lived by, in an age that underestimated her completely. Some were real and difficult skills. Some were rules so unfair that a boss who enforced them today would be fired by lunchtime. And underneath all of it was a woman far more capable than her job title ever admitted. But first, one thing must be cleared up. You have an image in your head of the 1950s secretary, the one from the television shows, the pretty girl perched on the desk, there to flirt with the boss and find a husband. That image is mostly a myth, a pop culture invention that goes back decades and tells you almost nothing true. The real story is more interesting. Number 9 is a rule that would get a boss fired today. Number 1 is not a rule at all. Now, before we dive in, tap that subscribe button. You will not want to miss what is coming next. Number 15, shorthand. The first real skill, and one that has all but vanished from the earth. A secretary could capture human speech as fast as it was spoken, well over 100 words a minute, in a system of swift symbols called Greg, or Pitman shorthand. The boss spoke, and her pencil flew across the steno pad in a private code of loops and lines, catching every word of a letter or a memo in real time. Then, she sat at her typewriter and turned those symbols back into perfect English. It took months of training to learn and years to master, and today it is essentially a lost art. She held an entire technology in her hand and her head. Number 14, the typewriter, mastered. The typewriter was the main tool of her trade, and she did not merely use it, she commanded it. Speed and flawless accuracy on a heavy manual machine, a Royal or a Hermes, with no screen, no delete key, and no second chances. A single mistake near the bottom of a page often meant retyping the entire page from the top. So, she did not make mistakes. The clean, fast, error-free page was a point of professional pride, and the sound of a skilled secretary, at full speed, was the sound of the modern office itself. Number 13, the switchboard. In an age before direct dialing, the office telephones ran through a switchboard, a wall of cords and plugs and blinking lights, and the secretary often ran it. She connected every call by hand, plugging and unplugging, holding 3 conversations in her memory at once, never letting an important caller here so much as a moment of fluster. It was a real, operational skill, the human nervous system of the entire office, and it lived at her fingertips. Number 12. The credential nobody remembers. This was a profession, not a pastime, and it had the standards to prove it. The National Secretaries Association was founded in 1942, and in 1951, it introduced the Certified Professional Secretaries Examination, a rigorous test that legitimized office work as a genuine, skilled career. A woman could earn a professional certification in her field. The organization still exists today under a more modern name. The secretary was a trained professional, certified, and examined, however little the culture around her chose to recognize it. Number 11. Own the mistake, never argue it. There is a genuine piece of workplace wisdom buried in a 1950 training film called Office Etiquette, and it has aged better than almost anything else from that era. A young secretary in the film makes an error in her dictation, and when her boss points it out, argues that she is right. She quickly learns the lesson: admit the mistake instead of arguing about it or offering alibis. Ask when you are not sure instead of making a wild guess. That advice was true in 1950, and it is true today in any job for anyone. The secretary was taught to be accountable, and accountability is a kind of strength. Number 10. The appearance code. Now the rules begin to tighten and to chafe. A secretary's appearance was strictly governed. A model secretary training film of the era warned against too much perfume, against a revealing sweater, and against wearing bright red or fuchsia in the office. Lipstick was encouraged, but applying it at your desk was forbidden. That belonged in the powder room. Hair was to be kept short and neat for office work. Much of this was simply the grooming standard of the day. But a great deal of it was the policing of a woman's body and appearance in a way that the men in the same office never faced. And that contrast tells you something true about the era. Number 9. Make the coffee and smile about it. Here is the rule that would get a boss fired today. A great many secretaries were expected, as a matter of course, to make and serve the coffee, to handle their boss's personal errands, to be addressed by their first names while addressing him formally, and to absorb a daily current of casual condescension without ever once letting it show. The expectation that the skilled, professional woman in the room was also there to serve the coffee, simply because she was a woman, is exactly the kind of thing that modern workplaces have rightly worked to leave behind. She did it every day with a composure that hid whatever she felt about it. Number 8. The etiquette of rank and sex. The office had its own elaborate code of manners, and the etiquette authority, Amy Vanderbilt, spelled it out in a 1954 column. In the social world, she noted, a man is always introduced to a woman. But in business, the rule flipped. A subordinate woman worker was introduced to a male superior. Because in the office, rank came before sex. A secretary had to navigate these fine distinctions daily, knowing precisely how to handle an introduction, a visitor, a senior partner, In a world where every interaction had an unwritten protocol and getting it wrong reflected on her boss. Number 7. Discretion, absolute and total. The secretary knew everything. The boss's calendar, his telephone calls, his correspondence, his salary, the deal that had not been announced, the meeting that was not on the books. She was trusted with the entire confidential life of the business. And the first rule of that trust was silence. A good secretary was a vault. She heard everything and repeated nothing. And that discretion was one of the most valuable things she offered, worth as much as any skill she had been tested on. Number 6. Anticipate everything before it happened. The mark of a truly great secretary was that problems disappeared before her boss ever knew they existed. The double-booked meeting, quietly unbooked. The forgotten anniversary gift that somehow appeared on his desk in time. The report he would ask for, already typed and waiting. She ran his day a half step ahead of him, smoothing the path so completely that he could believe the path had simply always been smooth. That invisible competence was the whole art, and its reward was that no one ever saw it working. Number 5. The separate lounge, the separate world. The small daily segregations of the office were constant. In many workplaces, the men could smoke at their desks, but a woman who wished to smoke had to go to a special, separate lounge. There were rules about where she could eat, how she could speak, what she could wear. That simply did not apply to the men one desk over. None of it was dramatic on its own. All of it, together, built a world in which a woman was reminded in 100 small ways every day that she worked in a place that had been built for someone else. Number 4. Marriage or a baby meant the door. This is the hardest rule and the most unjust. In a great many offices of the era, a woman was expected to leave her job when she married, and almost universally when she became pregnant. A pregnancy meant you quit. No exceptions. There was no maternity leave, no holding your position, no return. A woman could be the most skilled professional on the floor and still be shown the door the moment she started a family. And the talent and experience lost to that single rule across millions of women is almost impossible to measure. We name it plainly. It was wrong. Number 3. The ladder she was allowed to climb. Within these walls, there was still a real ambition and a real hierarchy, and women aspired to climb it. The goal was to rise out of the typing pool, the room full of interchangeable typists, to become first a stenographer, then a private secretary, and finally an executive secretary to a senior man. The top of the ladder a woman was permitted to climb. It was a narrow ladder, capped well below the boardroom, but the women on it were ambitious and skilled and competing hard. And reaching the top of it was a genuine achievement in a world determined to limit how high she could go. Number 2. She ran the office. Here is the open secret underneath everything. The executive got the title, the salary, and the corner office. But the person who actually ran his working life, who knew where everything was, who remembered every name and every deadline, who kept the whole operation moving hour by hour, was his secretary. Remove the executive for a week, and the office often ran fine. Remove the secretary for a week, and it ground to a halt. She was the institutional memory, the operational engine, and the quiet competence on which the whole enterprise turned. And she was paid a fraction of what the men around her earned to do it. Number 1. Not a rule at all. She was indispensable. After the shorthand and the switchboard and the coffee and the unfair rules, the truth that the era could not quite bring itself to say out loud was simple. She was the one the place could not function without. By 1950, secretarial work was the single most common job for women in America, with 1.7 million women holding it. And the modern corporation, that gleaming bronze tower on Park Avenue, ran on their skill from the inside. Joan started as the girl who typed what she was told. She ended, decades later, with her own name on her own door, because the competence she learned at that desk was real, and in time, the world was forced to admit it. The secretary was never the small part of the machine. She was the machine. 15 things. Some of them were skills as demanding as any in the building. Some of them were rules so unjust we can hardly believe they were ever normal. And the woman who lived by all of them, who typed the perfect page and ran the switchboard and kept every secret and was sent home the day she started a family, was one of the most capable and most underestimated workers in the entire American economy. She ran the office while the office insisted she was merely decorating it. And slowly, secretary by secretary, daughter by daughter, the women who came up through those typing pools changed what the working world was willing to let a woman become. And somewhere right now, a young woman sits in a glass office not so different from that tower on Park Avenue, with a title her grandmother was never allowed to hold, making decisions her grandmother would have made just as well if anyone had let her. She thinks the women before her just typed and smiled and fetched the coffee. She has no idea. They ran the place. They ran it from a steno pad and a switchboard in bright red lipstick they were only allowed to fix in the powder room. And every door she walks through today was pushed open, a quiet inch at a time, by a woman the world called just a secretary. Thank you so much for watching. If this changed the way you see them, give it a like. Tell me in the comments where in the world you are watching from, and whether anyone in your family ran an office from behind a typewriter. If you want more forgotten history of the generations who came before us, please subscribe. It truly helps the channel. The next story is waiting for you right now.